Our scripture reading this morning comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verses 1 through 7. Hear now these words of God. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I am going, Jesus said. Thomas replied to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
So your friends will know for sure that you were here at World Communion Sunday. Amy will be available for photo opportunities with you at the end of the service. When I was in college, we had a chaplain who was very adept at working with students who were seeking and searching, asking questions, even questions about really just who is Jesus. He was very helpful, and he would confess his own faith, and he would say something like this in small group settings. He'd say, look, if any of you would be willing to give your life to him, you will run the risk of being discombobulated and commandeered by the most interesting person in the world. But he said, some of you have questions. Some of you maybe even have some doubts, but we're having this conversation because there was something about his life that's compelling to you. So if you really want to know who he is, he said, let me put this before you. Start here. Give as much of yourself as you can to as much of Jesus as you understand, and then see where that takes you. That's interesting phrasing. To as much of Jesus as you understand, and see where that takes you. Do you see the hint? The hint is that it's often we come to believe more about him. We come to know more about him. It's in the following. He reveals himself in the joys and challenges of the fellowship of the followers. But in the chaplain, there was another part of that. He said, give as much of yourself as you can to this. He didn't say, let this be a little kind of pinch of religion, something that you have over here in one of the well-defined corners of your life. No, he said, bring to this seeking, bring to this searching your treasures, your interest, your will. So now in the 14th chapter of John, we have Jesus. He's not talking to a group of college students. He's talking to his band of followers. Jesus knows where they're at in his journey. He's close to the end. This is going to be the last time he has this meal with them. He's going to have a meal much like what we had with him. And we'll be having this meal today. He was getting ready to pour out his life. You know they didn't take his life. No, he says, I gave my life. What will he say to us here today? He says, this is my body. It's given for you. Out of love, he gives this without looking back, without counting the cost. And pointing to where the road is traveling, he says this to his disciples. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. You see what he's offering here? He's offering a whole way of living. He's calling it a life. Now, if someone offers you something like that, is it enough just to say, I believe? Is it just enough, the nod of assent? No, doesn't that call for a large yes? What's an appropriate response to someone who says, here's a life? To say, well, here's mine. I will give it to you. Jesus doesn't say, I am the way, the truth, and the lifestyle. You see, there's a difference here. Jesus came to save all of us, to lead every bit of our human being down the road to redemption. All the untidy, unraveled ends that compose a life. So Jesus says, here is something I'm calling abundant life, John 10:10. And he said, so Jesus isn't saying this is a nice little pinch of religion you toss in. It's a prime time leisure activity. Lifestyle or life? Oh, we're really into lifestyle. You know, we have programs. Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous. I was at the Panthers game a few years ago, and they have very nice, thick programs. And there were about 8 or 10 pages in this program devoted to the lifestyle preferences of some of the Panther players. I remember one of my favorite defensive ends. I read closely, you know, some of his choices. Let's see. His favorite figure in history, Abraham Lincoln. His beverage of choice, a Corona beer with a lime in it. His clothing option, Carhartts. The last book he read, a Robert Ludlum novel. His favorite movie, I think it was Braveheart. Oh, and his current choice of rides, a refurbished 1957 Corvette. What's a lifestyle? A lifestyle is an assembled set of personal preferences. It's a blend of all the choices we make about the different compartments of life. I make those choices. You make those choices. So what are your choices? Which is it? Is it the Neiman Marcus look or the Mass General Store look? Is it steak and potato diet or vegetarian diet? Is it backgammon or bridge? Are you a People magazine reader or a New Yorker reader? So now let's see, we get down to religion. Let's see. Oh, Christian. Denomination. Oh, we'll put Methodist. So what do we have? We could have not really very much. We could have a faith that is just a preference among a lot of other preference. A spiritual oblique, laid aside other lifestyle features. I like what Tom Long said in one of his writings about differentiating between lifestyle and life. He said, you know, lifestyle choices are personal whims. A lifestyle can be adjusted with the push of a button on the remote control, with the shift in a reading pattern, with the purchase of a new car. But a life, man, a life is all of us. And therefore, a life tends to be more involved and messier, and it's harder to change. A life is every aspect of who we are, every card we hold, weak or strong. Renting the video Braveheart, that's a lifestyle choice. Volunteering every week at a soup kitchen may very well be a reflection of a pervasive calling, a life. So when Jesus comes along and says, here it is, I'm bringing this to you and to the world, it's a way, it's a life. He's talking about an all-encompassing reality. He's talking about a life where every aspect is seen as the arena of God's saving grace. I am the way, the truth, and the life. We'll never know what that is until we bring ourselves to it, our wills, our treasures. This is our stewardship season at Central. We have a great stewardship team. And they've come up with, I think, a great biblical core for us, and that's the story of the widow's mite. And we'll preach from that next week. They did a nice turn of the phrase. They took that word might, M-I-T-E, and they're asking us this question: what might I give? Well, this morning, as we get started, and I listen to John 14, I think the answer is we start with ourselves. You know, we say, I'm going to try to find out what Jesus has in store for creation, for me, for all of us. And so I'm going to bring my life. But how do we know we've done that? I mean, how do we know we've made it an all-encompassing reality? Well, here's one way of knowing that if you've made that kind of move, if you put your life on that path, you're going to find your faith pervasively in all the different facets of your life. You're not going to find it just pinched off in a little corner that people call religion. Everywhere we go, whatever we're doing. That's why I've never been a big fan of that phrase, full-time Christian service. We used to use that a lot, separating, designating the difference between me, clergy, and you, laity. I'm in full-time. No, isn't it full-time for all of us? It's not a matter of learning how to do a few religious things on top of the things we're doing. It's learning to do the things we do in light, all the things we do, in light of being followers of the way. Isn't that why Jesus told parables and stories about real life? He talked about matters like anger and forgiveness and ordinary injustice and disappointment. He talked about real stuff to show us he wanted us to follow him now in this life, not some other life. And he wanted us to follow him not into some little roped off corridor, but into the whole of life. Look, a lot of you here, you know what Jesus said about a lot of things. Right? So what do we try to do in the different areas of our life? We try to live accordingly. Try to live without contempt and just see how your life runs. Try to live as though there is a life giver that is interested in and listens to us. Try to live as though every person you meet is related to you. Try to live without worry, one day at a time. Try doing those things, not for 1 or 2 hours on Sunday morning, but every crook and cranny and crevice and corner of your existence. Try carrying that into all your relationships with family, friend, coworker, stranger. How do we know, though, we've made that kind of move? I don't think it has to be that mysterious. Are you an apprentice? Say, are you a disciple to this way in the living of your daily life? If I was asked this question of you, are you a carpenter? You wouldn't have to hesitate that much. You may not be the most experienced or the best carpenter in the world. You may have been a carpenter for 2 or 3 months and that's it. But the evidence as to whether or not you are a carpenter or not is simple. It's self-evident. Are you disciplining your life around the skills, the insights, the principles of carpentry? Are you an apprentice to the way that Jesus called the way? You say, oh, but I'm not there yet. I'm not perfect. No, that's not the question. Are you working at it? Is that, have you put your will, your treasure, you brought yourself to that? You're still growing. You're still learning. We all are. Even a beginning follower of the way, though, is still a follower. If you've given your life, you're going to find it pushing into all areas of your life. And I think there's something else. If you have given your life, you're going to find yourself being stretched, challenged. You're going to find yourself trespassing old boundaries of learning and doing, discovering about life. Someone has said, once you give yourself to Jesus, you spend a lot of time standing on your head, looking at the world from upside down, seeing the world as God sees it. I was coming to a church a few years ago. I was coming down 240, and a church had just put up a new billboard. And this is what the billboard said. We got what you want, now come and get it. Made me think a little bit. And we got what you want. Look, Jesus has a whole lot more in mind than just meeting our conflicted and confused needs. He seems to be very intent on giving us needs we would not have had if we had not met him. I find that when Jesus speaks to me, he's forever severing me from some of my most cherished values like comfort and security. Why? Because he wants me to discover what it is to have heft and zest and scope to my life. C.S. Lewis in the book Mere Christianity, he talks about that parable, the living house, George MacDonald's parable. It's a good parable. MacDonald says, imagine yourself a living house and you ask God to come in and refurbish the place. And at first, it makes a lot of sense. You're setting the drains right. You're patching the leaks on the roof. But then God starts knocking the whole place about in ways that don't make sense to you and say, what in the world are you doing? Throwing up wings over here and putting out stories over there and adding courtyards and running up towers. You thought you were going to be made into a nice little decent cottage. Here's God making you into a palace. Forgive me, church. Forgive me, friends, when at times I've made it sound like Jesus is always going to make it easier for us. No, he wants something more than that for us. He wants to give us a whole new way of seeing, being, living, doing. He wants to give us something he called a life. Well, we get to choose. That's what I love about the grace of this meal, the grace of Jesus, the grace of God. We get to choose. He wants us to be free to make a mature, responsible choice, our choice. I'm free to say yes. I'm free to say no. I'm free to say something in between. And I think, well, I know a good many people, and they are good people, who have chosen something in between. They said, well, yes, my preference when it comes to religion is Jesus. I'm going to check that box. I'm going to have him in my life as a little spiritual applique, as just a pinch, just a pinch. The problem with that is that it doesn't wear very well. After a while, it just keeps getting pared down, trimmed down, until Jesus becomes more of a what than a who. Just a concept to be dabbled with once in a while, rather than a life force that might change us. Just another something we have to attend to on a long list of things to do. And when it gets to that point, it becomes all duty, all obligation, no transformation, no liberation, no elevation. Well, we get to choose life or lifestyle. Next time you go to New York, do this. Go to Fifth Avenue. The RCA building's there on Fifth Avenue, and some of you know, you've seen in front of that building, there's this very famous statue. You know what it's a statue of? It's Atlas. Atlas carrying the world. Charles Atlas, the bodybuilder, he was the model for the statue. This unbelievably, magnificently proportioned man, strong and powerful. And there he is. He's bending over. He cannot even completely stand up under the weight of the world. Some people, oh, that's what it looks like when people like you and me, we try to just carry it all, carry the world on our shoulders. But for me, it's also a picture of what it looks like when what you and I are part of today becomes all obligation, all duty. After a while, it's no longer wings, it's weight. And you can't even stand up under the weight of it. And sometimes you want to just roll it off and let it go. Oh, but let's walk across the street, across Fifth Avenue. You know what's across the street? RCA building, St. Patrick's Cathedral. We're going to go into the cathedral and we're going to go behind the high altar where there is the shrine to the little boy Jesus. Interesting shrine. There's another statue there. It's a statue of Jesus. He looks like he's about 8 or 9 years old. And you know what he's doing? He's holding the world in his hands. And it looks as light and easy as like he's holding a beach ball. The one who is life giver says, bring me your life. And when we do, when we say, here it is, my will, my treasure, my world, we find that we have something that we don't have to carry. We find it carries us. Carries people like you and me beyond mere pulse and respiratory existence into what Jesus called preposterous, abundant, my cup runneth over life. Join me now.